Hello everyone. Welcome to Alt Shift Studio. My name is Sabi Ahmed and I'm the Associate Director and Curator of Ishara Art Foundation. In today's session of Alt Shift Studio, we're with the artist Amber Majid. Amber is a multidisciplinary visual artist working in New York and Lahore. Her practice unfolds writing, performance, collage, animation, and digital renditions that engage with family archives, national symbols, and images of cultural displacement. There's a fragmentation of space in Amber's work that she uses as a means to interrogate multiculturalism on the one hand and cultural hybridity on the other. Amber was part of Ishara Art Foundation's second exhibition titled Bodybuilding that was curated by Nada Raza and took place from September to December in 2019. Amber is going to be expanding on how she defines a studio as an interface. We're going to begin with a presentation by Amber, followed by Q&A with myself and my colleague Laura Metzler. With that, we hope you'll enjoy the session, and over to you, Amber.
My name is Amber Majid, and I am a visual artist living between Lahore, Pakistan, and Brooklyn, New York. Today, we will be exploring my studio, or more specifically, where the production of my work takes place. I'm a visual artist that works with digital media like animation, performance lecture, drawing, and speculative fiction to reinterpret South Asian histories, narratives, infrastructures through a feminist lens. My art training took place in Pakistan, New York, and Beirut. As a Pakistani American, I look into familial materials to investigate modern nation-state narratives specific to Pakistan. When I mention family materials, I'm referring to my grandfather's photographic archive from my family house in Rawalpindi, Pakistan. I'm interested in the physicality of these analog prints and the kind of distraught organization of my grandfather, Pirzada Wahid. He was known as an amateur photographer based in Rawalpindi. He passed away a few years ago, so hence the distraught organization is even more disorganized since his passing. He took photographs as a flaneur. Some of the subjects he took photographs of were of flora and fauna. He also documented the development of Islamabad in the 1980s to early 2000s. Since I had known him growing up, he was diagnosed with dementia. And it made me rethink of memories as an alternative, non-linear history. Since there is kind of a distraught chronology, this kind of displacement of time and space, I also looked through my maternal uncle's Harun Pirzada's failed tourism company and his promotional materials. And through a project, I wanted to trace the demise of the tourism industry in Pakistan up till 2001. Rethinking that kind of time was really interesting for me. All these sources and objects are passed down directly from my uncle or grandfather or stored in our family home where I grew up in Long Island, New York. That's how I initially came by some of these materials, or more specifically, the photographic prints of my grandfather. So the location of my studio is ever changing. I travel a lot and have many studios ranging from my time in Pakistan, in Dubai, in Beirut, and currently in New York now. I've had studio spaces because of artist residency programs. So the references, texts, and materials travel wherever I go, and I kind of take from my surrounding environment as well. So there's a lot of translation from the physical to digital, digital to physical, and all these kind of layers in between. So behind me is a screenshot from one of my animations called In the Name of Hypersurface of the Present. It is a kind of end result and collapsing of various references and motifs from different sources that I gather. Because the nature of production, or the nature of production in my practice, is about re-entering the interface. I've been thinking a lot about the portable ability of the studio. So my main container is my hard drive. So let's re-enter the interface. So I am sharing the different forms that my practice takes. I will share two projects that are shown on the page. First is In the Name of Hypersurface of the Present. The resulting artwork expands from the screen, specifically this multi-channel animation, and it extends into other mediums, which include prints, vinyl print, you can see in the back, kinetic sculpture, and installation. The installation photo documentation was taken from my solo show back in 2018 at Rubber Factory Gallery in New York. Here is a link for the animation series. Here's an excerpt.
The new book of popular science, 100 Ways to Perform the Secrets of the Earth.
Another project that I am working on is called Trans-Pakistan Zindabad. Long live Trans-Pakistan. Again, you can see here there are some prints. All these photos are installation documentation from a group show that took place at Trinity Square Video in Toronto in August 2019. It is a show that also developed around a video piece. You can see right over here. It also included prints and a virtual, prints are right here, and a virtual reality installation with a custom vinyl floor piece. All the visuals in this project are an amalgamation of stock imagery, popular print culture that I have scanned, printed, drawn, and scanned again, all re-entering the interface. Here is an excerpt of the video.
The imaginary of Trafalgar Square becomes Tawheed. 1. The lions guard the family's only space. They roar at onlookers outside of the heteronormative grid. They are maintained and tamed impeccably. No other fluid is required other than of global capital networks. You will be punished to offer your saliva. Spitting will be punishable. Bodily fluids from within are prohibited. Only transactional droplets of labor are accepted. Polish the lions in the scorching heat so the nuclear family may glisten. As the user, if you move 15 yards forward, the roundabout can be occupied. Moving counterclockwise, step by step, moving counterclockwise against the dunya created by Behriya. However slow or fast you proceed, you continue to trace away from the national grid and urban plan. Using these calculations from the urban plan, it's possible to work out the circumference of the Earth. Round and round the roundabout. Loiter and slow down. The axis spinning the angle does not change, only the direction of the axis. Given this information, what is the circumference of the Earth?
आप मोबाइल से पूछो. Ask the mobile. Are telecommunication systems cheap? Mobile possibilities.
So what you can see in the animation here is layering of captured footage, text, imaginary, and imagery layered on top of each other, whether it's cutouts of drawing or print making visible near the end of the excerpt. The collapsing of all these references are stored both digitally and physically. I sort all the materials within these processes in physical binders and folders. Images I collected and printed, graphs, diagrams, and images of the body. Transferring and translating from various interface forms. The scanner bed. It is the actual scanner that I own and have access to. Printer. This is the printer I own. What imagery can I trace from and edit for drawing, etc. And through the LED tracing tablet. Once I rescan some of the drawings and other elements, I print digital collage through Elko printing data, get them poster specials. I'm probably the only person that understands the traveling of motifs from various surfaces, scales, and mediums. It is playful and intuitive. Transferring through these tracing papers and expand the content, but also in terms of scale. The drawing ended up as a vinyl installation with an iPad, which contained a digital publication, sensors, and a custom-made mat. I mentioned, so my hard drive is one of the most important resources I have. I have a hard drive for each project I have developed. Yes, I'm currently connected to 2 hard drives right now. This is Trans Pakistan Zindabad hard drive. I have a combination of site documentation of Beria town in Lahore, Karachi, and Islamabad in Pakistan, scanned tourist paraphernalia from my maternal uncle, and stock image animations.
This is Free Queen HD. This is Free Queen HD.
I mentioned my family's archives. In the digital project, Trans Pakistan Zindabad, Long Live Trans Pakistan, I revitalized my maternal uncle's failed tourism company, Trans Pakistan, to analyze gentrification by a corrupt housing corporation called Beria Town, based in Pakistan. This global enterprise houses miniature and large-scale reproductions of a Sphinx, Eiffel Tower, and a Taj Mahal, etc. The tourism company and the concept of leisure is an intentional method to subversively analyze gentrification, community, and images of world building. The multi-layered narrative and visual material overlap tourism, familial archives, metaphors of the body, and proposals of technological piracy as urban design. Here is a scan from a promotional envelope that my uncle used for his company. This is the front side of it. I have added edits over here to mobile, and I've crossed out some things. And so the original imagery has been taken by Harun Pirzada, my maternal uncle. There's also a combination of raw footage I have of Beria Town on site, as well as edited material. These are of some edits that I did. From that, I collapsed it onto live. I have a number of versions of this file in Premiere Pro, After Effects, Photoshop files, and this is the combination of the result of all the different file formats. I also have uploaded drawings and prints. This is an example of a print. And I did through etching on a plexiglass and then printing through a print machine, a big metal print machine. Some of these drawings. These are hand drawings that I scanned and helped create this. This project was very grounded in looking at a particular site and space and activating the aesthetics present there. Now let's move on to the next hard drive. I was interested in creating an alternative portal and perspective in a national narrative of nuclear nationalism. I created a speculative fiction out of my grandfather's analog photographs, research on a monument called Chagi Monument Hill that doesn't exist anymore, and visuals on poetry and science and green screen. The hard drive contains different visual and sound tools I use to create a world for In the Name of Hypersurface of the Present. There are various versions of each file and different formats. Stock material and digital collages, numerous scans, and a lot of material that did not enter the animation but were important parts of the process. This is a scan of one of the analog photographs that my grandfather took. This is documentation of mosque in Baksan. My grandfather used an analog filter for his camera to create this effect in the late 1990s, and he used that in a lot of his photographs. I was interested in the dome in relation to state religiosity as the impetus of this project. Another example of some of his prints. This is a flower bed in the shape of Pakistan as a map. We also have different versions of each motif. As you can tell, my hard drives are not really organized. So these are different versions of a motif. There are folders for other formats or other components, such as sound. So we got some stock sounds. Some computer-generated sounds.
Talk beer, talk
Excuse
beer.
me, I am sorry. I don't understand you. I can't hear you. I beg your pardon. What is the matter? I don't know. Who are you? I don't know you. What do you want? Please speak slowly. I have no time. Hurry up. Come and go out. Congratulations. Happy New Year. Happy birthday. Can I help you? What would you like to drink? Good night. Goodbye. Long live Pakistan. Goodbye. Do come back again.
Excuse me, I am sorry. I don't understand you. I can't hear you. I beg your pardon? What is the matter? I don't know. Who are you? I don't know you. What do you want? Please speak slowly. I have no time. Hurry up. Come and go out. Congratulations. Happy New Year. Happy birthday. Can I help you? What would you like to drink?
Got some cracks, some pirated Adobe files to help me develop my projects.
बड़े प्यारे लग रहे हैं।
The seed of technology planted today will be a productive force tomorrow.
Thank you, Amber. This was by far the trippiest studio visit I think I've ever done. Coming to the questions and answers to this part of the conversation, I had a few questions, and so did Laura, with regard to your practice and especially with regard to your studio. And something I found interesting in your presentation is that the archive and the studio seem to collapse into one another. Now, this is something I find even in other art practitioners, and it happens in distinct ways. But can you tell us whether these two entities also distinguish from one another, whether they also become separate? Because the collapsing seems to be more common right now. But what is the relation between them, and how do they also stand apart in your practice?
Thank you for the question. I think that the archive, or what I consider the archive, which is not just, as I mentioned, it's like a number of sources. It's not just the analog photographic material that my grandfather used. It's also stock imagery. It's also objects that I scanned and other images that I've gathered from popular culture and scanned and allow it to be part of the interface. So all these various sources of images and visuals end up becoming kind of re-enter the kind of interface, which I consider the process of actually production within my artwork. And like, in a way, the interface is more my studio. So the archive is more kind of base material or source material
that kind of makes sense once entering the interface, and then has a logic of its own. So it's all part of the process, but it has a different logic throughout the experience of producing a particular project or work.
Something I remember you telling me before is that the archive is practically scattered in your practice, and it actually comes together based on the projects that you do. And so, in fact, it's a studio that mobilizes the archive, and the archive is not usually, as it's understood, sitting somewhere waiting to be used. Right?
Absolutely. It kind of activates all these materials that have its own meaning and context, but then transforms when put together in this way.
Very interesting. And in extension with that question, I also see that the archive and the home also often collapse into one another. And why I bring up the home is not literally where you stay, but the idea of a home, because of you having a place of residence or also exploring homes back in Lahore, as well as the places from where you operate in New York and the places where you live. So what is the relationship between the archive and the home in the same extended inquiry?
Right. I think that's an important distinction that you mentioned in your question of like, what is the home, rather than it being just where you're residing. Because I can say, for example, in the last 3 years, I've traveled to through residencies and other opportunities. So to places like Lebanon, to Dubai, but I wouldn't necessarily call it my home. I think when I think about the home, I think of it more through the home is like wherever I go. So in a way, the home is like wherever my body is. And I think that's a concept that a lot of diasporic either artists or academics really consider, of like where you are presently and the circumstances around that. So that's a kind of process I internalized early on because of the experiences that I've had of having to set up a place of production in places that may not be familiar for me. So in a way, it was very freeing for me to look at the archive in that way, to be open to the possibilities of gathering materials wherever I go. And again, as I explained before, when I gather these materials of various sources, they kind of transform and create a logic within themselves, like another kind of logic. So this kind of dispersal kind of comes together within not only the interface but it's the fact that I'm gathering these materials. So stickers, for example, that I got from a small stationery in Mar Mikhael in Beirut somehow entered a narrative about nuclear nationalism in Pakistan. You know, it's certain aesthetics that were important to create the narrative and story behind my research.
For me, I'm really interested in this relationship between the physical material and kind of the digital realm in your practice, and the points where they meet and where this kind of continual back and forth. So if you can talk a little bit about how you see that relationship and also what sort of dictates the movement in either direction as you're working on a project.
I think very early on, I was very interested, early on in my practice, I mean, I was interested in kind of the tension between the virtual or virtual desires or virtual images and how they relate to lived experience and kind of physical experience and the tension between that. So I did early on work with green screens and sets and performative bodies, like amateur performative bodies in space. and they would be contained in like a single channel video installation. And it would be interesting to see how amateur performers, how endurance was a big part of how to upkeep a desire of a virtual space. And I was interested in that tension, and vice versa, of how fully immersed in a virtual space you can kind of lose a kind of physicality. And so in some of the ways that I deal with, let's say, the animations, I tinker with that, of like moments of physicality that appear in virtual imagery, and then within kind of physical, like remnants of the body, how that kind of infiltrates into virtual imagery. So in a way, each project kind of plays with it differently. So the two projects that I showed today, or like elaborated on, was In the Name of Hypersurface of the Present. And in that project, I looked at completely immersing the viewer within the virtual and using the green screen as a motif and like a very important character in a way to talk about what happens when you're fully immersed in a virtuality that might be immersed in state propaganda, right? So what happens when a kind of green light from nationalism is also projected in the digital, and how do we interact with that? That's one. And in the Trans Pakistan Zindabad project, I looked at kind of lived experience, like really considering what it means, looking at, you know, a housing community, looking at how digital tools can allow others or users of, let's say, any of the services offered by this failed tourism company, how those tools can be used to allow them to re-enter the housing community on different terms. So engaging with the virtual as a way for kind of like social emancipation. So considering the tensions and relationship between both is something that I'm like very much interested in.
Thank you. That's excellent. And especially the way you describe the tensions, I'm sure there'd be so many more to be found in different projects where, in fact, you can see it as sort of dismantling of one or disarming of one and the other. I'm also curious whether green color flags can serve as green screens. Is that something you sort of, that comes into your practice?
I mean, I think when I look at the color green,
flag?
I'm referring to just the chroma key. So even if I'm relating to a kind of nationalism that might be present in Islamic or Muslim countries, it's a particular kind of dark green. But when I create, or when I'm interested in creating a narrative around that, I'm trying to think of altering it, another kind of shade of nationalism that's more inclusive for marginal bodies. So playing on that of like, yes, it's green, but it's also can be a site of projection, and it can also be have all these different meanings that relate to the digital sphere.
Right. The virtual is the possible or the potential, and an altered green that can
but it's
have a
totally submerged in also very physical infrastructures.
Absolutely right.
So it's also playing with that.
And talking about physical infrastructures, I wanted to pick up on a formulation you shared, which was around portable studios. To my mind, every studio somewhere encompasses a network of people also, and relations and skills and knowledges. Could you elaborate a little more about this dimension of your portable studio? Who are the people that get mobilized when your studio moves from one location to another? What kind of conversations and learnings happen in the process?
So, as I mentioned before in some of the answers to some of the other questions, is that setting up this kind of studio in other places has just been a part of my recent practice in the last couple of years, because I've been traveling and doing research and being part of spaces that I might not particularly be familiar with, but they somehow enter my practice. So an example I can give is I did a residency at Ashkal Alwan in 2016 to 17, and I don't really feel that I have much of an affinity with the city of Beirut or the history of Beirut, but during the residency, other residents that were part of other parts of the region, we ended up having really interesting conversations. My projects are very much specific to kind of the conditions or the histories within Pakistan. And so it was a really interesting experience to have conversations that are about, let's say, broader ideas of state propaganda and gentrification in other parts of the region. And there's a lot of kind of mirroring or parallel narratives that are happening, let's say, between Pakistan and Turkey in terms of Islamization in the recent past. And there's a lot of issues of, gentrification are kind of replicated in Cairo and in Beirut. So having those kinds of conversations allowed me to look at the project or my research in a more broader context, where it's specific, the details are specific to Pakistan, but it can be accessed by so many people that are not familiar with the context. So that's been one way of exchanging of knowledge and considering, like, what is the studio visit in the context of a portable studio, whether it's through like email exchanges or at a cafe, how do we share information, or in the context of what's happening here right now. But essentially, when we consider, this is like knowledge production and like exchange, but when it comes to the production of a lot of the works that I do in the recent past, the kind of people that I mobilize are kind of outsourced, kind of technological support. So since we're talking about virtual and digital, I have many of the tools to do most of the editing. I've been trained in video editing and shooting, but there's a lot of things that I've been interested in, which is looking at 3D environments, certain kinds of sound recording. So I've outsourced, since I'm in New York, I've outsourced to some sound recording studios called Harvest Works in Manhattan. I also collaborated with some institutions. I mean, it all depends on funding, right? So I got a grant to do work with the 3D Max editor from Outpost Artist Resources in Ridgewood and Brooklyn. I also got a huge fellowship from the Digital Earth in the Netherlands, and I was able to travel and also have a production budget. And I eventually ended up collaborating with 2 other animators to make certain snippets, as well as a VR artist to create a VR installation. He helped make the sound. His name is Daniel Sabio. He's a great artist himself. So there's ways in which having access to all these resources and skill sets, it ends up being more of a question for me as an artist of like where my hand, like how much control I have and how much hand I have in the process. And I think that I still very much am a control freak in that way. And I'm still I will learn printmaking just to, even if I don't have access to a printing machine. I will apply to a residency and then get access to a printmaking shop and then learn how to print from scratch for like a 2-second snippet of my animation that will be like uploaded, you know? So I think I'm very much interested and open to many possibilities via portable studio or not, just like in my practice. That's the way I consider it.
Yeah, kind of given this expansive look, and especially, you know, connected to this last project that you've worked on, like what does the kind of portable studio look like in this moment and in kind of the immediate future for you?
So currently I am based in Brooklyn, New York. And so I do not have institutional support as of yet. I'm going from residency to residency. So I've currently set up my studio in my apartment, which is a 1-bedroom in a 4-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. And so I've just been, during this like current time, I've just been like reorganizing what my studio, like all my material, set up equipment. I've had, as I mentioned before, printer, scanner, and drawing. All that equipment are things that I own now. So it's a lot easier for me to like go through it and work on it kind of more intimately and on my own time. And so I have some upcoming residencies. I don't know what form that will take, whether it will be remote or in person, but I have a residency at Pioneer Works in fall 2020, which is the technology residency. They will help me develop. I will work with software engineers, the people who run the residency, and create an interface for a walking tour app for the project related to Trans Pakistan Zindabad. So literally creating an interface that people can interact with that are not on site. And also a website potentially. So all those things, it's interesting because the amount of outsourcing that I have to do now just to get these projects realized is an interesting process. So in a way, the kind of portable studio is now kind of ever expanding and kind of branching out and like grabbing all these other bodies to have conversations with. And
It also now has a management wing.
Yeah, that I was not expecting, but I'm actually very glad. I'm learning a lot. So that's what I'm doing. And this is not unique considering what it takes to be an artist in a very competitive city like New York. So having a portable studio or pockets of, accessibility to make or work on your art practice is kind of how most artists go. They like ration out portions of the year to be able to practice, and then they do like 3 part-time jobs in between. So just getting these slivers of time and space is a huge win, I think. So hoping to a lot more expansion on the pocket studio or portable studio.
This is great, Amber. I mean, wait, is someone's mic speaker on or hello? Oh,
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. Yes. Well, this was great, and a studio visit or a studio tour is a very curious thing because it's not an exhibitory site, and you have to sort of turn a studio inside out in order to show something. It's not a space really of showing, so to speak, right? And I think it was very telling going through your practice of the fact that maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, even on a regular day up until now, a studio visit would have probably been something like this, a chat over a laptop in a cafe or in some residency space, which then I think you've articulated very beautifully, of describing the studio as an interface, describing a studio as a dispersal of pockets of accessibility. And I think these are going to be strong takeaways from this conversation for me. So thank you very much, and well, all the very best.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you for inviting me for this. This was great.
Bye-bye. Thank you.